Welcome to In the Seams, a podcast by Broken and Mended. And now your host, David Heflin.
I want to welcome you back to In the Seams. I'm excited today to share an interview with you that I had with Mandy Dawson Farmer, and Dawson is her maiden name, but she uses that because there's another Mandy Farmer out there that's an author. But Mandy has some unique things that she's been working on that relate to helping people with chronic illness and chronic pain. And you'll hear her share some of her story, which in itself is a testimony to the faithfulness of God through her suffering and hardship that she's been through, and how God has then used that and turned it around to be a blessing to others, even though she's still, as we all are with chronic illness, still dealing with the implications of chronic disease. But I think what is unique about what Mandy has been doing is the type of book that she has made available, that she has published, which helps parents, particularly moms. I think it would apply to fathers too, that they can speak to their children through this children's book that she has written about what they are struggling with in terms of their chronic illness. The book focuses on a mother who has fibromyalgia. But these are characters in the book. It doesn't mean that it can only apply to situations with fibromyalgia. And she has, in fact, had feedback from other people, including people with cancer, that this has been a very helpful resource in reading it through with their small children and helping to affirm also the mother or the father in the struggle that they're going through, to realize that just because they have chronic illness, things may be different, but they're still great. They're still good parents. But it's mainly, of course, to help communicate with the children what is happening in their life on a level that makes sense to them. And that's a needed resource. When I went through this with my kids, when my kids were small, my kids are mostly grown now. I still have one in high school, two in college. But when they were young, I had a hard time explaining what was going on with me. And they didn't need to know the ins and outs of the disease itself. They needed I needed help to communicate with them what I was going through, why I wasn't as available as I wanted to be, and maybe how we could help each other in that. And so this is a great resource. I hope that you'll get it. You'll find it linked in the show notes. She's also working on another book that's not yet available, that is a devotional book. You'll hear us talk about that. It's also unique because it is structured around the idea of different movements in the music. She uses kind of a dissonance to harmony type of approach, and she'll talk some about some other musical terms that I better not try to repeat right now because I don't know music on that level. But I know we all love music, and she uses that as a way to kind of talk to us about our suffering in our chronic illness, and as a way of pointing us to the scriptures as well, the Psalms, and then some old hymns that she points us to in that work. And that will be out, she's hoping, I think she was saying maybe next year sometime, maybe end of the year. I can't remember exactly what she said, but you'll hear that as well. But as always, I just want to thank you for listening to In the Seams. We're trying to bring our offerings a little bit more regularly. If you've not subscribed, we hope that you do. And also would ask that you, like and rate and share our podcast. We really need to get this out to more people. We believe the offerings that we have given to people, the different interviews that we have done, will be helpful and really span the gamut, of chronic illness and the different topics and so forth that people struggle with, that as it relates to Christian faith and the hope that we have in Jesus. And so we're glad that you're here and hope that you will enjoy this interview with Mandy Farmer. Well, I'm here with Mandy Dawson Farmer, and that's how you can find her online, and it's her author name, and I'll just be calling her Mandy for the episode. But Mandy, I want to welcome you to In the Seams, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very excited about talking to you today.
We're excited. I'm excited about getting to talk to you also. You reached out and shared a little bit about some of the unique offerings that you have that can be a blessing to those who need to be able to communicate, especially with their kids, about chronic illness and chronic pain and what they're going through. And we'll get to that. I think it might be helpful for people to have a little bit of a background on your story, your journey. I know in your email you mentioned you've been struggling with chronic pain for about 13 years. I think, by the way, I have it's the exact same amount of time for me. It's been 13 years, and it was 2011 that my struggles began. So I can
Mhm.
relate to that time frame, that time period.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about your journey with chronic pain, and maybe also kind of bring us up to where you are today with it.
Okay. Um, in retrospect, I have struggled with pain most of my life. I was one of those that had what they called growing pains when you're in puberty, and they're finding that that is one of the signs of fibromyalgia. But I had a lot of things that, in my mind, that was just how life was. Everybody had those pains, and I did well, and I was I was having a great life. I say I was living the dream because I was doing what I wanted to do. I was married to a minister. I had 4 children. Was in children's ministry, children is one of my passions, and I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And until I went on a cruise, and I got off that cruise, and I never got my land legs back. I felt like I was bouncing around in a boat all the time. And they couldn't figure anything out. They said, no, it's not these typical things that a person can have. And about 6 months into that, one day I went to lay down. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was just going to rest before the evening service. And my back went into convulsions, and I couldn't get back up. I couldn't finish laying back down. And for the next month, I could only lay flat on my back. If I moved even the slightest bit, these contractions would just overtake in my back. And so, of course, we went to doctors, and I was put on a very high dosage of steroids. Was the only way to control the pain. Um, so doctors after doctors, until they could figure out what was wrong. They finally, I was one of the lucky ones because in 6 months' time I had a diagnosis. That doesn't usually happen for people. But they sent me right down to Mayo Clinic, which you have to wait. That was the only thing, is you have to wait about 6 months to get in to see them. And but when we went, they did all those tests, and they decided you have fibromyalgia, and they gave me a medication that helped me manage that pain. And I had to slowly get off of the steroids. But when I did that, then I started having swelling in my knees and I was having these other issues. And they did the x-rays. They said, we don't know what's going on. Your blood work is all over the place. I'm sending you back to Mayo Clinic. So we got back down there, and he said, I think that you just have osteoarthritis, but we're going to do the blood work again and see. And sure enough, I had rheumatoid arthritis. And that really is my key diagnosis. Um, but the fibro is still probably the one that's more aware of, because they got the rheumatoid under control right away. The steroids had been hiding the rheumatoid arthritis as far as the labs were going.
Ah,
They said, oh no, you don't have any inflammation. But when I started coming off of them, then the inflammation came back.
I see.
So yeah. So I went down to Mayo for a pain management class that lasted about a week. And I learned how to manage my life. My husband was a minister, and I had to give up my children's ministry, but we were still trying to do that. For about 5 years, we were doing that, and he was staying at home with me and working from home, having an office at home instead of at church. but it was really wearing on him, and we finally ended up retiring. Um, and so then uh, we moved away, and I started blogging, and that's where I am. I basically just have to make sure that I don't overdo. I'm one of those go-getter people, so it's my husband has to kind of like rein me in sometimes because I want to do so much. He says, you can't do that. You'll regret that. He always lets me make the decision. He says, but you'll probably regret that if you do all of that. And, um, so that was the learning curve for me, was learning to give up some of the things that I love to do, like baking and running around doing all kinds of things. I'm kind of a social light. and but I have learned to do that pretty well so that I don't have too many flare ups. So that's kind of where I'm
Yeah.
at.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your story with us. And I mean, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that about having to give up things that they love. It's one of those other
Mm,
issues of chronic illness that people don't even think about unless they are indeed going through
right,
chronic illness, right? I mean,
right,
all the different
right.
ways it impacts you, whether it be, your mental health or your finances or giving up stuff that you love, which then also impacts the way that you feel about everything. I'm going to ask you a question, and it's not something I would probably ask people if they were on their first year or two of this journey, because I know for me, it took me a while to be able to answer this in any meaningful way. But I like to ask people that's been dealing with this for a while if they've learned anything about God, they've learned anything about their journey and their relationship with God through this. How has it impacted your walk with God on this journey?
Well, that is so amazing because God has really taught me so much. Um, and for me, He has many times in advance kind of given me warning that when I look back, I say, "Oh, you were preparing me for what was coming." After the cruise, my son told me one day, he says, "Hey, you need to listen to this new song," and it was Laura Story's "Blessings." Um, and I've heard a lot of people say that story, that song has meant so much to them, and it does to me. It still is. Um, yes, it really makes you think and kind of put everything into perspective. Um, and then that summer, I did a Bible study. It was an online Bible study of Psalm 119, which I had always kind of stayed away from. It's 176 verses, and it's kind of like, oh, you
Right.
can't read it in one sitting, and just kind of a scary thought to read it. Even though it's done in sections, it's still just, I had never done it. And that just drew me so much into the awareness of wanting and loving God's word. I had been a Christian since I was a child, and I loved the Lord. I loved serving Him, but I don't feel like I really had a good, strong friendship with the Lord until that point. And then when the chronic pain hit, that first month of being still, what I did most of the time was read the Bible and learned just so much that way. Just um, I, you know, in rather a quick amount of time, I read through the Bible in three different versions. Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, and just really kind of a eye-opening thing, and amazing to me how you can know a verse all your life, but then all of a sudden you're in a circumstance and that verse has new meaning, and then just having that daily conversation with him, and through each little thing that would come up, that he would just talk to me and helped me examine my life and think about, okay, well, what, what's going on? Why am I in pain? Is he trying to get my attention, or is there lessons to learn? And it was all of these, all of the above, I would say.
Yeah.
um, because he did draw me closer to him. And then I went through a time and I'm like, okay, Lord, look, I've got this under control. So you can take this pain away from me now. And he was like, well, let's talk about that. Do you really think that you would, stay close to me if I took the pain away? Kind of that thing like that the Apostle Paul had. Is like, I asked 3 times, would you take it away? And he said no. And we had that conversation, and um, I settled that I was going to have this chronic pain, and it was what would keep me uh, close to him. So, in a nutshell, I'd say that's probably the things I've learned. I have a book coming that's going to really delve into all the things that um,
Okay.
he taught me.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that book in just a moment. I, just want to say, I think for a lot of us, again, find that very relatable. Sometimes chronic illness, chronic pain forces us to slow down, forces us to, or
Yes.
maybe not forces us, but it creates opportunity to spend more time with God,
Hmm.
to be able to spend more time in scriptures, because our life is not just about being busy anymore or being productive.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, so I appreciate that perspective, um, and I'm glad you mentioned Psalm 119. That would be a great passage for anyone just to spend some time with.
Yes.
Yes, it's long, but you're not on a clock, so spend as much time as it takes to get through it
Right.
and really absorb
It's
it. Yeah.
it's divided up in little 8 verse sections because
Hmm.
it's an acrostic, I think, or something like that, or for
Yeah,
each
that's right.
letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So you can do like 8 verses at a time, and
Yeah.
um, oh, it's just so full of good. Oh, it really is.
Yeah, it's funny actually. We went through it on a Wednesday night Bible class recently. I didn't do my homework. The homework was you're
Mm.
supposed to read it before coming to Bible class. So in Bible class, we just kind of did the snapshot view of 119. But what you really need to do is
Right.
doing what you're talking about. Go through it 8 verses at a time. Maybe go through those 8 verses multiple times in a day while you're praying. Really internalize that, and so that's of course you can do that with any number of places in Scripture. But I kind of like that idea of going through Psalm 119. That's a
Yes.
powerful activity to invest yourself in. So you're an author, of course, and that's part of the reason
Yes.
why you're here on this podcast. We're going to talk to you in a moment about some of the works that you have done and what you're going to be and what you are working on or getting ready to publish. I'm curious about your journey as an author. Is that something that you were already before, the struggle with chronic illness came along? And if not, I'm curious, how did God really put that on your heart to use that as to be a blessing to others with chronic illness and pain?
Well, the funny part is that uh, I would like to tell the story about when I went to college and wrote my first composition and I got an F, and it's like, okay. And, but I had an awesome teacher, professor. And by the end of that, uh, my last paper, he read in class and said, this is my most improved student, but I still only ended up with a B. And I'm like, okay, we know you're not going to be a writer, but God had other plans. God had other plans there. And in children's ministry, I was writing plays for the kids. I would write, plays that would fit the personalities of the children that I had. And so at Christmas, especially, I wrote several plays for them that was just based on them. And I had so that was just something I did for my ministry, not really thinking anything beyond that with that. But then after we had to retire, um, I started to write about chronic pain. I wanted to write to those who your friends, you know, like try to explain to people what's going on in your life that they don't understand it, you know. Um, and so that's kind of where everything started. And right off the bat, there was a challenge. I was in this Christian bloggers group. We had a challenge in October that said, write for 5 minutes every day and just publish it on your book post. Don't edit, don't do anything, just write for 5 minutes every day. And you could either do their prompts, they gave you a prompt every day, or you could just do your own theme. And so I decided to write about my personal experience with chronic pain, and it resonated with people. People started saying, you need to publish this. And it was kind of done devotionally. It always seemed that everything would come back around to God, no matter, even if you tried. Okay, don't put God in here, but no, He's just so much part of it that it just came out of me. Um, and so I kept that in the back of my mind, but I really didn't take it seriously. For about 5 years, I just was blogging. And but people would keep asking, when are you going to write that book? When are you going to write that book? And in 2020, I said, okay, this is the year I'm going to work towards getting that devotional done. And so I went to, that was the COVID year, of course. So I got to go to a conference because it was online. And I could do it at my own pace because they recorded everything, and learned so much. And I met a gal there that was a homeschooler, and she said, "Hey, you want to help me out? I'm writing a course to teach homeschool moms how to help their kids write and encourage them to write by publishing their writing in books." And what she would do is give them a set of pictures, and they'd write a story around the pictures. She wanted me to be a beta tester, so I said I'll do that because that'll give me some knowledge about self-publishing. And through that, I wrote a little book about milk cows. I grew up on a dairy farm, so that was something I knew about. And you had to find a set of pictures, and that's what I found a set of pictures of. With the chronic pain thing, I couldn't find the pictures I wanted. And so I wrote this little book about milk cows, and people loved it, you know. And they're asking for more, and there's more coming for that. But then I joined a children's critique group, and um, started working on this Soft Hugs book. And the thing that I learned about the first conference was, okay, you have all these devotions, but you can't just plop them into a book and it sell. I realized that I was going to have to kind of rework them and put them all in a theme and lay them out the same, and do all of that. And so it's been a long process doing that. But that's how I got started with actual publishing of books.
Well, that's an interesting story, I think, in the sense that it really happened pretty organically for you just in the course of your life. And I mean, God can call us into things in many different ways,
Right,
but it seems like it was kind of a gradual, but at the same time, He was affirming you every step of the way
right.
as you
Mm-hmm.
moved into that. So I think
Yes,
that's a really cool story. And you mentioned this book called Soft Hugs or Soft Hugs for Mommy,
right.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's a book that helps parents to talk to their children about their chronic health struggles. And as I understand it, its focus in the book is on fibromyalgia, but it has application to many any kind of disease or chronic
Right.
pain that you have, it could help you have that conversation. I
Right.
shared with you, Mandy, before we started, just that I found that to be a particular struggle with my kids growing up. I would have loved, especially when my kids were little, I
Hmm.
would have loved to have had a book like this one that could have helped me navigate that. And if it was out there, I didn't know where it was. And so I'm excited that this is now available for people that need to be able to talk to the kids, because this impacts our kids too in ways
It
that maybe they
does.
can't express. Yeah. So why don't you tell
Right.
us a little bit about this book and what inspired it?
Okay, well, it's loosely based on my experience. Now, when chronic pain really hit me, I was my children. My youngest was 15, so a little bit different story because they were teenagers and they were more involved, and you could sit down with them and talk to them about what was going on um, pretty easily. Um, but I wrote this because I'm more children's minded, smaller children. I wrote it from the perspective of probably a preschooler. And she has a brother that's a little bit older. And she just shares about how great her family was. And, um, and then she starts comparing that we used to do this, but now mommy is sick. And then about it it talks about several things that changed in the life of the family, and that mommy had to go to all these doctors and learn about, in this case, fibromyalgia, she calls it. And
Ouch. So
and
kind of appropriate, isn't it?
yes, it is. Yeah, my formatter has said, "Hey, does everybody use that term like that, or is that something you came up with?" And I said, "I just came up with that, but it does resonate. People like that." So um, anyway, so it has right in the middle of it the doctor explaining about different symptoms that you can have with fibromyalgia and how it can be different for each person. And then it goes on about how mommy learned to manage her pain and how there were some days that were bad. Some days mommy stayed in bed. Some days mommy could sit on the couch and we would, you know, entertain her, and how daddy had to help more and the neighbors helped more. And um, just that soft hugs is, yes, people with my fibromyalgia, they cannot take a big squeeze, but you can hug them in other ways by just uh, kindnesses that you do. And that's kind of the theme of the book there. And then it just has a nice ending that mommy was great before, but she's still great. you know, she
Yeah,
just
yeah,
need,
that's right.
you know, she just, that's a little message for the parent. It's like don't get stuck on that you're no longer a great mom, because you still are.
Yeah.
You still can be. And then just for fun, the um, the awareness ribbon is purple, and so we have little purple ribbons all through the book that are hidden, that they can look for all the purple ribbons. And then it has the question section that I had a child psychologist help me develop the right questions, to talk to your kids about. So, and it really does not matter that if you don't have fibromyalgia, it helps with almost any illness that you might have. I mean, cancer. I had a friend that just had a heart attack, had open heart surgery, and she said she used it to talk to her grandkids about how you had to be careful around grandma now, and how she couldn't do all the things that she used to could do. And So I think that it's something that can be helpful for a lot of people.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to say too, of course, we may have some fathers that are listening, and even though the character
Yes,
in this book is a mother, I think the same principles would apply because
exactly.
fathers also get down on themselves sometimes about not being able to throw the ball with their kids or whatever it might be
Right,
that fathers want to do. Because
right,
I can remember going through that myself, and I still even though the book focuses on mommy, had I still had kids at that age, I could have used it for the same purpose. So I want everyone to realize that if you got
right.
kids and you need a little help communicating with them about what you're going through and what that means for everyone in the family, this is a great way to do it, and it helps you be able to communicate with children on their level and a message of affirmation for you as the parent as well. So I will have links to that in our show
Okay,
notes where people can go and find that book, and I hope that they will. And I want to ask, I know that you've alluded to it in our conversation, you have another manuscript available to be published. I know it's a devotional book, but if you want to elaborate a little bit on that, I think that would be helpful. It would give us something to look forward to for what you have coming out. And maybe let us know if there's an actual time that you already know that it might be coming out.
okay. Well, I'm still working on. I decided to go ahead and try to do it traditionally, but I haven't found the right connection there. But I really, it's because this is the real passion. This is, the children's thing to me is a fluke. Now, God had his reasons, but, the children's books are just what has come out of this. But this devotional is the thing that I really, really, want to get in people's hands. And what I've done is because music is another one of my passions, and music is what gets me through the day. And that and my faith, of course. And so I have done this devotional kind of in a musical theme. Each week of lessons or devotions has a theme, and I found a title. It could be secular, it could be classical, you know, from a title of a music piece of music is the theme for the week. So, for instance, the first week talks about the surprises that you have in chronic illness, and that it's not just that one first surprise of your life change, but all through uh, more things show up. There's always another thing that happens every time you turn around. Whenever you feel like, okay, I've got this, then something else happens, right? And so the surprise symphony is where it starts, and I take a little piece of my story, and I connect it with a biblical person, and how, okay, here's how we're the same. That first week, I talk about Joseph, and I connect with him and his different times of just when he's rising up, he's pushed back down, right? And I use that as the theme that when you get through that week, that you see that God is working through everything and that there is hope. And so that's kind of how each chapter works. There's 6 weeks of lessons, and so I use music in another way. Is the title of the book is From Dissonance to Harmony, and so and dissonance is a musical term which means it doesn't sound quite right. It's not in harmony, it's and so I take that my dissonant moment and I connect it with a counterpart, and that's another musical term, which is when you have two things going on at the same time, and then the harmony piece, which where you find harmony where God shows you the harmony in it, even though you're going through it. And then I have assignments, which is to read a particular psalm. I had a pastor always tell me to read a psalm every day, and it is such good advice, and I advise it. um, but this one, I select a specific psalm that I assign you to read, and also an old hymn. And I don't want you to necessarily just listen to the song. I want you to look at the lyrics and kind of meditate on the lyrics of that hymn and find what you can learn from that hymn.
Well, it sounds like, from my experience anyway, that would be a fairly unique book. I don't know that I've seen a book that was arranged that
Yeah,
way.
right.
And certainly both for people that understand and know music, that will maybe have a special meaning. But I think all of us love music and can
Mm-hmm.
kind of relate to the idea of
Right.
dissonance and harmony. We can certainly relate to the Psalms, which were of course originally
Yes.
sung, and as well as some of these old hymns that do have such great lyrics. And
Yes.
so I appreciate that that's going to be available. So we don't know when, is that right?
No. I hope that I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking for a traditional publisher. If it doesn't happen, then I'm fine with just going ahead. And so hopefully by the end of next year, this can come to fruition. So
Well, we'll be looking for it then, and who knows, may have you back on in the seams when that comes out, and we'll talk
yeah,
about that book a little bit more. But certainly, we'll want our listeners and other places where people connect with Broken and Mended to be aware of that and be looking to that. So, as a final question, I wanted to ask about, sometimes people have something already brewing in their mind or actually working on something already. Do you have any other resources or works that you're thinking about that will benefit those that are struggling with chronic illness?
okay. Well, I have set up at mandyfarmer.com. I about monthly, sometimes a little more often if I just get inspired. But I have tips and resources for people going through chronic illness of any kind, really. I use the acronym SOFT HUGS, and so I give S is for scripture. I give a scripture that might encourage them, and the O is oasis, which here's a place that you might be able to find calm. So it might be an app, it might be a video of beautiful music and beautiful sceneries, something like that. F is usually something funny, because laughter is the best medicine, and continuing on like that. So yeah, I share podcasts there. I share um, the U in Hugs is usually my update on my writing and what is happening with my books and what's going on with that. So it's kind of a place to keep in touch with what I'm doing, but at the same time, I'm giving all of these little tips and places to get help. So, and if you sign up there, you can download some scripture cards. Um, on my original blog, which I do with a friend, there that's called mandyandmichelle.com. And that one, I share more about my story and about health issues. Now that I'm over 60, I have the aging stuff going on too. So I share about osteoporosis. I share about getting a mammogram, all those different kinds of things. That's all on mandyandmichelle.com. Michelle is a grandmother raising her grandson and homeschooling. And so she writes about that. She writes about all kinds of home things, recipes, how to do different things in the home. And she writes about her homeschooling. So that's that's my two blogs.
Okay. Well, I actually, while we were talking, I went and subscribed. So
Oh,
it's real easy.
thank you.
Uh, and so mandyfarmer.com, we'll link it, of course, um, in the show notes. And so thank you for that. And again, I just appreciate to me how your resources and your approach to things are, as I would expect for anyone, to be somewhat unique because everybody's different. But really, you've put a lot
Yes,
of thought into these different ways of connecting with people, and not just one kind of just unilateral approach. And so I
right,
really appreciate what you're doing, and I think that will be certainly a blessing to others. So, like I said, it's really easy to subscribe. I just did it just now, and think others ought to do that as well. And then there's those other blogs that you talked about that are you can check or not check, but they're there available as well.
right.
So this has been very good, Mandy. We thank you so much for taking the time to be on In the Seams. I've been very encouraged by what you're doing and how God is using you and your talents as an author. And we certainly want to continue to lift you up in prayer as God opens doors. And whether that be with a traditional publisher, whether that be, just to publish it yourself, whatever it may be, whatever God's will is, the point is that it reaches more people. And so
Right,
we're glad to be at least
right.
a tool in order to help people get to know about some of these resources. So, again, for our listeners, I just want to say please check out the show notes. You'll see links to the resources that we talked about. You will also see some links to some different scriptures that we brought up during the conversation, and I'll just try to put anything relevant that came out of the conversation in the show notes, so you don't have to remember it and go look it up later. You can just click on that. And we thank you so much for listening to In the Seams. I always like to close by reminding you that you can, of course, I don't know where you may be listening to In the Seams, whether it be on Spotify or Apple Podcast or some other place. It's also on our website and our RSS feed, but also our website at brokenandmended.org. So if you're not already on our website, I recommend that you go look at brokenandmended.org. Please check out the different support groups that we have that are being offered and other resources, including this podcast or other podcasts that we've had recently and in years past. I think this is our third full year to be doing In the Seams podcast. And also, we have a blog there. In fact, we published one from Esther Smith yesterday that she wrote, and she's also someone who has written a 31-day devotional book on chronic illness. And so I may relink that in our show notes too, just because that's also a great resource. We need more of these resources, and so many of these different
Yes,
places, different types of needs. There are a lot of resources for I think for chronic illness, chronic pain. It's still a very underserved community, and there's still very limited resources available. There's beginning to be some more, but I would say that we're still a long ways to kind of catching up to where maybe some other types of support ministries are. And
right.
so just
Mhm.
glad for what you're offering there, Mandy. So again, thank you for being with us, and I want to thank our listeners for being with us. Um, and one other thing I'll mention, of course, and I don't always do this. Our producer Andres is always wants me to do it. Mention that if you are so moved, you can financially partner with us in Broken and Mended. You'll find a place for that on the website too. You're never expected to. I know that people with chronic illness and chronic pain have extra financial burden, but there may be some people that are in a position where they can, and that helps us to reach more and more people through resources like this, including our materials that we're developing for support groups, and especially for us to be able to print those in places where they can afford them, like in East Africa, particularly in Kenya, some of the countries over there where we have a lot of support groups. So, Mandy, thank you again for being with us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed getting to know you and talking about my journey. And I'd love to hear from anyone uh, about their journey and connect with you. And uh, just God bless you.
All right. Thank you, Mandy, and thank you for listening to In the Seams.